What if I said you could quadruple your returns in property by not buying with cash? What if I also told you that this is just the beginning? Well, it's true. We'll show you an example of how you could 4x your returns on one deal from 333% to 1,332% just by using leverage. And we'll show you 2 additional ways that leverage can multiply your returns even further. But there are big risks involved in using leverage that you do need to be aware of. So stay till the end as we'll explain what they are. But before you find out why leverage is a property investor's best friend, you need a solid grasp of what it is. Now imagine this, you're on a push bike and you're trying to go as far as you can. All you use is the power in your legs to get moving. Now imagine an electric bike instead. The electric motor multiplies the force that you have, allowing you to go further and faster than you could have on your own. However, there's a catch. If things go wrong, the consequences can be worse. This is how leverage works in investing, where you use other people's money as leverage to control an asset that you wouldn't be able to control with just your own money. In the property investing world, using a mortgage is a form of using leverage. Now let's use actual house price data to show you the crazy returns you could potentially get by using leverage. We'll ignore transaction costs like stamp duty and fees in this video just to keep things simple, but just be aware that they do obviously exist. So, the average UK house price in January 1998 was around £66,000, and in January 2023 it was around £286,000. So from 1998 to 2023, the average house price in the UK increased by around 333%. But how does your return on investment change if you bought in cash versus using leverage? Well, let's find out. A 100k property bought in 1998 would be worth around $433,000 in 2023, a 333% increase. So if you bought this property in cash and sold the property, you would have made £333,000 in cash and a ROI of 333%. But what happens when we use leverage? Well, if you use a 25% deposit on a buy-to-let mortgage, you only put down £25,000 as a deposit. The price of the property will still go up the same amount, and you have a mortgage of 75k that you owe the bank. If you sell the property, you pay off the mortgage of 75k and you're still left with the remainder as profit. You still have a profit of £333,000 after paying off the mortgage, but you only put in 25k of your own money instead of 100k. So your return on investment ends up being 1,332%. That's around 4 times the return. So now you know one way of how leverage can boost your returns by 4x through capital appreciation. But what if I told you that there's another hidden phenomenon that can make you even better off without you lifting a finger? Well, consider this. If we use the same example of a 100k property in 1998, from 1998 to 2023, the value of the pound has gone down by around 54% due to inflation. So the value of the mortgage in real terms was £75,000 in 1998, but by 2023 it falls to around £34,500. It's essentially like this debt has just disappeared or been written off because that same £75,000 is worth so much less in 2023. If this doesn't make sense to you, then don't worry. At the end of this video, we'll share a resource with you that explains this concept so you can understand it properly. But for now, I want to share how using leverage is like using a cheat code that propels you into the future. Think of it this way. Maybe you're able to save £5,000 a year. If you want to buy a 100k property in cash, it will take you 20 years to save enough to buy it, and that's not including all the transaction costs on top. But if you use a 25% deposit on a buy-to-let mortgage, you can save for the deposit in about 5 years. That's a difference of 15 years. Now let me show you just how much you could lose in this time period. From 1984 to 2023, annual house price growth averaged around 6.37% per year, according to the Halifax House Price Index. Obviously, this is an average, so some years it will go up even further and some years it will go down. But in 15 years, at 6.37% growth per year, a 100k property would increase in value by around £152,000. So that 100k property could be worth around £252,000. So by the time you've got 100k saved, that same property is now worth 252 grand instead. But Now also imagine the leverage scenario, where you own the property and you got to make use of those gains over those 15 years. That extra £152,000 in equity could be used to put down deposits on a few extra properties, and you'd also be making rental income in that 15-year period. And inflation would be eroding the value of your mortgage debt. You can see why wealthy landlords often use leverage. However, think back to using a push bike versus an e-bike. The risk of a push bike is maybe falling over and getting a bruise or a broken bone, but an e-bike can go up in flames, and leverage is no different. But to understand how things can metaphorically go up in flames, you need to understand what I'm about to cover next. When you use leverage, you use a mortgage, so you have mortgage payments. And whether you use cash or leverage, your monthly rent is going to be the same. But when you use leverage, you have to deduct your mortgage costs from your rental income. And mortgage payments can eat up a significant portion of your rental income, so your short-term cash flow suffers. Investors need to carefully manage this trade-off between leveraging for long-term gains and the impact on short-term cash flow. If you want to focus heavily on immediate cash flow, you may want to consider using cash or using less leverage. Another reason to be wary of leverage is that house prices can go both up and down. When they go up, it's all good, and you can amplify your returns because of leverage. But what about when they go down? If you own 25% of the property, but the price falls by 30%, then the mortgage on the property is worth more than the value of the house. And you end up in a situation that nobody wants to be in. Negative equity. Here's how this would look. You have a 100k property, a 25k deposit, a 75k mortgage, and the value of the property after dropping 30% is 70k. Now on its own, this isn't an issue. However, if certain things align in the wrong way, then this can be catastrophic for some people. When you're in negative equity, you generally can't sell your house because you're not meant to sell it for less than the value of your mortgage. But in what scenario would you want to sell your property? Well, consider this. Let's imagine that interest rates have shot up from around 2.5% to closer to around 6.5%, and your mortgage interest payments have more than doubled. Depending on the property, this could put you in a situation where your rent no longer covers your mortgage payments and other costs like maintenance, voids, and insurance. If you don't have savings or extra money to subsidize these costs from elsewhere, you may need to sell the property. But you're in negative equity, so you can't. Luckily, having minimum deposit requirements of around 25% helps you here. For example, in the crash of the late 2000s, prices dropped about 18.7% from peak to trough, and in the crash starting in 1989, prices crashed around 12%. So having 25% equity would mean you wouldn't have fallen into negative equity in either of these scenarios. Although, this is not to say that we can't get a bigger crash in the future that goes and reduces house prices by more than 25%. But let's be honest with each other for a second. You want to invest in property to grow your money and beat inflation. But like we said earlier, inflation can actually boost your returns by a silly amount in property. If you don't fully grasp how this works, then you need to watch this video, which shows you how it could make you hundreds of thousands of pounds better off.